welcome back to the Zero Generation podcast. This is the podcast for the dreamers who left home and are making a new home abroad. This is the final episode of the season, and it is a bittersweet experience. Actually, I'm lying. I'm actually excited to be wrapping up. When I started this, I envisioned that it would be one and done. I remember my initial very nerdy docs that I wrote and conversations that I had with a few folks, and I said, this is a limited series podcast. But I think it was recording, my second or third episode in, I realized that I was just learning how to do this. I was just coming even to understand what the topic was and what the power of the podcast could be. And I was coming into my own, and the podcast too was very, coming into its own as well. And I realized there has to be a future season at the very least. So this is not goodbye. This is just a recap of season one, to talk about the highlights and no lowlights, because there were no lowlights, but to talk about the highlights of each episode and then to sort of wrap it all up. So let's start from the beginning. I think my takeaway from it all is that we being people, in fact, humans, right? But especially people who have this immigration experience, we're all more similar than we think. To see folks comment on the posts, send me DMs, comment on, on the reels and all, saying, wow, I see myself in this, or wow, this is so me, or wow, how did you articulate this so well, just drove home for me the fact that this experience, right, of being a dreamer who left home and is making a home abroad is real to people, and not just at that top level or surface level, but really at a deep level. And so I've been very excited to explore it this entire season, and I'm looking forward to doing some reflection even on my own and, planning for the future. But to go episode by episode, thinking about LD's episode, one of the things that really struck me was something that I don't even know if it applies to me personally, but it was something that he was really convinced about, which was about focus, where he said he knows himself. And because I asked him, right, is he ever going to go back to music? Is he ever going to go back to podcasting? And he was like, I'm the kind of person who, when I'm doing something, I have to focus. I can't go an inch deep. I have to go a mile deep. And I love that level of self-knowledge that he has, such that it has helped him to be able to successfully pivot from things and know that, okay, now this is what I'm focused on and I'm going to be super good at it and I'm not going to do anything else. He also made a really good point about the oxygen mask concept, or he spoke about it as the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where he said, you get to a point in your life where you've solved problems for yourself and your family, and that's the point when you need to look outwards, right? And that's what the oxygen mask concept is about. Like, once you put on the mask for yourself, you look around and see who else needs help. And as people who have left home, people who are living in the diaspora, we can get so laser focused on making sure that we are surviving and thriving, making sure that we're doing well, and that our family and our close circles are covered. But sometimes we may miss that opportunity to reflect and say, I'm actually doing well. How can I start to think of the broader collective? And so that was reflective for me as well in LD's episode. Next up is the Bowel episode, which was really insightful, really joyful. Not a small part due to Bao's outfits, which was a character on that episode. But Bao has accomplished something in that he is one of the, leading Nigerian restaurant or African restaurateurs in the Atlanta area. And he has managed to stay very focused on the business, laser focused on the business. He also has so many years of experience. And I think what is what is a highlight to me of his journey was how it all started. How I think about it is, help comes unexpectedly, or your break comes unexpectedly. He met an Asian man. He was in his teens, and through striking up a conversation, he got his first opportunity to be an entrepreneur and to even bring his friends into the fold and provide an opportunity for his friends to earn an income. So, sometimes it's in the least likely of places. And there's also the benefit of starting young. So, whoever is listening to this, you're probably not as young as Bao was when he started, but you're the youngest you will ever be. So I am the youngest I will ever be as well. And so I'm talking to myself as well. We need to be open to those signals and those breaks when they come, and take those leaps so that we can build whatever experience that, we want to build in the future. So, help comes unexpectedly. That was my takeaway from Bao's episode. Then Maya's episode, what was really poignant was something that she talked about when she talked about how she started to define herself the way that she heard people reflect herself and her work back to her. And in that episode, I said, this is like when Jesus was polling the disciples and he asked, what do men say I am? Or who do men say I am? And people said who they were, who other people said Jesus was. And then Jesus asked them, well, who do you say I am? With Maya's episode, she talked about how she was just talking about branding. And then she realized that people were also then branding her as a woman of faith. And then she incorporated that. A lot of times we're so close to ourselves that we can't see who we really are, or who we're reflecting, or parts of ourselves that we're reflecting that are actually really core and really beneficial. In fact, this reminds me of a conversation I had with a friend at a party a couple of months ago. And, where she was telling me about this podcast, and she said that what you're doing is so powerful because there will come a time when Nigerian immigrants will be just everywhere, and we're getting into position now. We're going to be, everywhere. We've done politics, culture, music, fashion, corporate, entertainment, and this is like a rallying cry. And it was so. I just took it in, and I was like, wow, you articulated this in a way that's even inspiring to me, who is, the one running with this idea. So sometimes it's great to pause and to listen back to people, to people reflecting on who you are, because it gives you insight, and sometimes it's even prophetic and inspirational, and it keeps you going. That was takeaway from Maya's episode. Then Tenny's episode, parenting as a first generation, parenting as an immigrant and parenting first generation children when, especially when they're Gen Z and Gen Alpha. What I really liked about Tenny was her humility and her openness to being flexible with her children, while also knowing the things that she does not, because she's still very much parenting, she does not want to compromise on. So, it was walking this fine line between, these are the parts of the culture that I will not, I will hold the line on and, not bend. But then if my daughter, I think the example she gave was, getting an extra piercing, allowing her daughter and her husband to convince her that, this is one thing you can be flexible on. And I think, with each situation, with each child, it's not even going to be the same template from time to time, but maybe keeping that principle of knowing what you're definitely, not gonna bend on, and then everything else remaining flexible. Then going to Onwah's episode, my big takeaway from that episode was that we work so hard as immigrants, as Africans, as Nigerians, as women. Sometimes we forget that we deserve ease. We forget that it's not every time hustling, breaking grounds. We deserve ease. And sometimes that ease comes in reaching out and taking the help that's already there. Sometimes we feel ashamed to take advantage of things that like, government provisions or people in our network who are already open, who've already opened their arms to help us, and we want to do everything by ourselves because it gives us feeling of satisfaction, but it also leads to so many of us burning out and feeling tired because we're taking on more than we should. So, remember as you go on this journey, and I'll remember as I go on my journey, that we deserve ease and we deserve to accept help. And we should also ask for help from people that we trust. Then going to Francesca's episode, my big takeaways there were, one, you need to do your research. You need to do your research. Maybe 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, there wasn't this much information out in the world. And maybe people would have had more of an excuse to say, oh my gosh, I didn't know at all that this was the experience. But there's so much information out there now. All you need to do is Google and you'll find a plethora of articles, podcasts, YouTube videos, blogs, you name it, about topics related to moving and migration. Sometimes we think of moving, and, Jackpot as like this pot, there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and there's no way it can ever be worse than what I'm experiencing currently. Do your research. And in fact, do research. When I was in debate teams in secondary school, you would exercise, or you do an exercises where you think of the points of the opposing team so that you can come up with counter opposing points to your opponents. And so that's the kind of research that I think I just do naturally, like almost like try and talk myself out of things, so that I kind of seek that information, so that I'm not looking for just information that supports the decision that I'm trying to make. And I hope, no one takes this as like talk yourself out of it, but do your research, be informed. And of course, you can't ever know everything there is to know, but you can go in a lot more prepared than you would have been, than, some of us, would even admit to having been when we first, came into the US or joined corporate America. And then my second takeaway from Francesca's episode is, don't lose yourself. We again tied to that idea of work, coming to America, coming to Canada, you're coming to take, or so you think, right? You're coming to get, but in the process, there's an exchange. And we need to hold the line for ourselves and say, okay, these are parts of myself that I'm not willing to exchange for money, or these are things I'm not willing to do because they go against my values, or they don't make me feel like who I really am at my core, or they're taking time away from me, or they're taking my community away from me, maybe. And it could be something like, I'm not going to move to this region because in this region I'm not going to have the kind of community that I need. I'm not going to take this kind of job because it's going to take time from my relationships or my family. So don't lose yourself. I think one thing I've learned over the past year, of a year that has been really transformational for me, is that we're always changing. We're always changing. Life is always tweaking and turning us, and we need to be aware so that we don't morph into a completely different version of ourselves to a point where we don't recognize who we are. Like, that's something that I've really had to reflect on this past year and being like, wow, I've changed so much. But and I like the ways I've changed in some ways, and the ways that I don't like how I've changed, I've been able to walk myself back to who I was, And finally, the episode with State Representative Segun Adeyina, who is, one of less than 30 elected officials of, Nigerian descent in the U.S. Even that number is impressive. I think it was 26, but, I think it's still just the beginning. It was an inspiring episode, and, I don't think I'm going to ever run for office here or anywhere, but I think that there's some people who are built for it. There's people who are equipped for it. And if you're even curious, step up in whatever way that you can, start a community, join a community, become more involved in the community that you already joined, provide value, right? People are coming in, help them, step up, and in being of service and in taking that agency, you're actually adding value to yourself. And you might just wake up one day and you're running for a very senior office. Tied to that is that we need to have the realization that this is home now. Even if you think even if you're like me and you think there's a year out there in the future when you move back home or you leave the country, this is the home that you live in now. And, you and I need to take responsibility for it. So if, whatever it is, becoming, part of community organizing, voting when and where, we can, keeping up with the news and just being much more active citizens, taking agency and just realizing that this is home. That was, my second big takeaway from that episode. And yeah, so those are all the episodes. It was a whirlwind in a lot of ways. And I know that I'm going to be spending a lot more time reflecting on what this season meant and what the next season should look like on the Zero Generation podcast. And I was thinking about it like we're zeroing it out, like we're really just taking it down to like ground zero and like tearing apart some of these topics and these issues that we all tend to talk about in our private lives and even on public forums, and just sort of reshaping the conversation on a different platform and with different voices. I am super grateful to everyone who has liked, shared, commented, subscribed. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I don't take attention for granted in a world where we have so many options of how to spend our time and attention. I don't take your support for granted. Thank you to Adode Media for being excellent production partners. Thank you to my brother Akin for the music for this podcast. Thank you to the rest of my family for just amazing support. My husband, my brother, my parents, and to everyone who has like said a kind word, DM'd me, seen me in person, and cheered me on. Thank you all so much. Your support has been amazing, and I'm looking forward to doing more, to doing better. I don't think I am there yet, but I'm so happy to just like have thrown my hat in the ring. And yeah, I'll be back before you know it. Thank you all, and I'll catch you on the next season of the Zero Generation podcast, the podcast for people who have left home and are making a new home for themselves abroad. See you next time. Bye.